Good man, good. And you obviously you kept doing the. You've done. I mean, every time I look, you the action for Assange, or you were live, or you were. It was non-stop over the last few months, and we really appreciate the work you've done. And haven't Twitter started it? Haven't they restricted the action for Assange? For anybody listening, Steve's. You're part of the action for Assange crew, aren't you? At Slow News Day.
Yes, sir. I'm also the national organizer for Action for Assange. And yeah, I went to go log in last night, about 8 o'clock Pacific time, and the account had been restricted. Unity for Jay's account was restricted for a moment. Unity for Jay Germany was restricted. And this is obviously Julian Assange's birthday is on Friday. Action for Assange's 1 year anniversary. It starts tonight with our vigil. Um,
Pretty important
Pretty
week, isn't
critical
it?
time. Yeah, pretty critical time. So the censorship never surprises me, but the timing of it is like mwah, for the deep. It just
It's the excuses they give as well when people complain. They just the excuses they'll say it's unusual activity. It's never unusual activity with I don't know you know it's never unusual activity with other causes that maybe aren't so political, is it? They get a it's
you'll never see sunrise movements account restricted.
exactly exactly and it's this the censorship is Julian Assange always said it was going to come from the companies, didn't he? He always said it was going to come through these, through corporations rather than governments, and he's right again, isn't he?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he was talking about this back in 2010, 2011. And then when, excuse me, when MasterCard and Visa stopped accepting payments to
Yeah,
WikiLeaks and Amazon stopped hosting their servers, there were all of these giant corporations that had nothing to do with quote unquote nothing to do with the United States government that were stepping in on behalf of the United States government to inflict pressure and or pain on WikiLeaks.
and
So he
then
was
obviously,
absolutely right.
and I mean that's then you've got the financial way that they've, the finance. I mean, they pretty much bribed Ecuador, didn't they? It was it
Yeah, with
Korea.
a $4.2 billion IMF loan and then a couple of more billions on top of that, sent the entire country into upheaval as well.
Yeah, they were out in the streets about 6 months later, and he had to flee and the capital, didn't he? The guy, and then you've got then they've collectively. I mean, what the hold America has over us is incredible, and then you've got what they're getting Sweden to do, strong arming Sweden, and they're strong arming Australia to do this as well, and going after just a journalist, a
Yeah.
publisher. And at some stage, you've got to say, well, hold on a minute. This is a journalist. At what stage do we go, well, okay, this isn't a democracy we've got anymore, is it? In fact, who won World War Two? You know, have we still got the
Right.
fascists around us right now? Because this is a journalist publishing, doing journalism better than anybody else on the planet. And the Western, quote, democracies are the ones who are persecuting and ganging up on him.
Yeah, it never ceases to amaze me the uniformity at which the Five Eyes countries follow the lead of the U.S. State Department. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now. The Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison, nothing more than a bagman for the CIA. Vanessa Baraster, the magistrate that's presiding over Julian's case management hearings and rendition hearings. You can't call it an extradition. Julian Assange isn't a U.S. citizen.
Yeah.
Can't be extradited to the U.S. You can be charged under the Espionage Act, but not granted First Amendment rights. I mean, come on. And Vanessa Baraster is, I've been calling her the concierge of the U.S. State Department because she arrives to court with, a pre-written statement. We found out yesterday, Gordon, that neither Barraster nor Julian Assange's defense team had been given a copy of this superseding indictment that the Department of Justice had put out through the press last week.
So they put it out through the press before his own lawyers have got it.
Or the judge.
Oh, yeah. I was speaking to Nina Cross yesterday, and Nina and I were talking about this, and we were talking about how, we're it's the subservience to American, but we're also talking about how the judge. I mean, in previous in previous case management hearings, he's in this basically perspex cell, isn't he, in the courtroom for a start. And they're constantly going to American authorities in the back of the court to get clarification on XYZ and clarification on dates. I've forgotten the point I was trying to make then, but I mean the point I think the point is, we're just a vassal state at the moment, and it's quite frightening, to be honest, seeing what powerful countries around the world are doing to him. And the point I was trying to get to was, for 7 years he was in arbitrary detention, and that's not me and that's not you speaking. We're just echoing what the United Nations found. And it's funny, isn't it, how the Western powers agree with the United Nations on some things and then they don't on others. They pick and choose when the United Nations findings actually benefit them. But for 7 years he was in arbitrary detention. Then he was dragged out in an act of fascism in what was it last year? I forget the year now. They're sort of melding into one.
Right.
And so he was then thrown in our Guantanamo Bay into he was in, for months he was in medical, because obviously he was in arbitrary detention, and that has its medical toll on him. He had to have a root canal. He needed a root canal. I still don't know whether he's had that done. He had a massive pain with his shoulder, and obviously he's got an underlining coronary problem as well, and top that all off, you've got coronavirus. So in this time, in his letter to me, he said that he's got 30 minutes, time on the phone, and he's got to compete with that time with all the other inmates. He can't get in touch with his lawyers at all. He's got no way he can actually prepare himself for this case that is, in my opinion, the biggest case of press freedom ever. And on the other side, you've got a superpower. Massive superpower. The biggest superpower the world has ever seen. And I don't know what they do, but they're press ganging, strong arming other countries around the world to do their will, so they can reach in and pluck a journalist out from under their noses when they have not actually done any crime, as far as I can tell, other than a trumped up bail jumping charge. He wasn't jumping bail, he was escaping extradition to the United States, an illegal extradition, I might add, I think, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
And
no, we know that they made a number of attempts to straight up black bag the guy. They sent a team of FBI agents to Iceland to try and get him. They coerced and bullied the Swedish police and the Swedish government to what was the they showed it in the Niels Melzer interview, some of the documentation, and the GCHQ had sent the Swedish investigator message saying, don't get cold feet.
Yeah.
Go after this guy.
Yeah.
The Stratfor emails.
The head of the GCHQ, the head of the Met, I think at the time was Keir Starmer.
Yeah.
Labour, Sir Keir.
And now, look at what he was rewarded with because of his constant persecution of Julian Assange. Look at Sean Henry, the CEO of CrowdStrike now, who, thanks to some leaked testimony from the Michael Flynn the debacle, I guess,
Yeah.
we found out that from Sean Henry himself that CrowdStrike had no visible proof, no documentable proof that the Russians hacked into the DNC servers. He
Yeah.
admitted this in open court, well, closed court,
So,
but it became public.
CrowdStrike, let's just say CrowdStrike, by the way, the CrowdStrike are the company that the DNC use, correct?
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
to investigate the hack of their server. And Sean Henry was the FBI agent who was tasked with handling Sabu, who was the rat that snitched out everyone in LulzSec back in the day.
right,
And
right, right. LolSec, who's LolSec?
so okay, this relates directly to the superseding indictment that came out last week.
Right.
Um,
All right,
in that
okay, there's a
indictment,
superseding indictment. All right, okay, we've got to slow down here because otherwise people who are listening are going to get lost.
okay,
So there's,
so in 2019, the Trump administration and the DOJ brought forth an indictment against Julian Assange. It had
right,
18 charges, 17 of which were under the U.S. Espionage Act of 1917. The 18th charge is a cyber crime charge, and they want to make investigative journalism illegal because what they're charging Julian with is uh, suggesting ways that a source could
can
help
cover his
protect
tracks.
itself. Yeah, yeah, which is something that investigative journalists all over the planet do. If you go to
Yeah.
the Washington Post website right now, there is a way to communicate with them securely and provide them with leaked documents without getting yourself in trouble.
Yeah. Not only that, the reason it's like that is because it's a fundamental, it's one of the first fundamentals of the Fourth Estate and journalism. You need to be a source of information that people can come to you and be able to protect that source's anonymity because what they're telling you might get them in trouble and powerful people might come after them. It's a fundamental of journalism.
So you're absolutely right. And so to kind of bring it all together here, last week a superseding indictment was released by the Department of Justice, not again, as we just mentioned earlier, not to the court, not to Julian's attorneys, but to the press. Um, and it all had to do with expanding the scope of the cybercrime charges. And in it, they talk about the Stratfor hacks, the HB Gary hacks, and those all relate to an offshoot group of Anonymous that was called LulzSec.
Right.
Uh, the person who was running the LulzSec ops was a guy named Hector Monsignor, who went by the online name Sabu.
Okay.
And by the time that LulzSec was operational, Sabu had been flipped by the FBI. He was fully working for the FBI. So
Okay.
this gets really interesting because it wasn't until after Sabu was fully on board and cooperating with the FBI that the Stratfor hacks took place. So in essence, the FBI hacked Stratfor. They had all of the files from the Stratfor hacks on FBI servers within 48 hours of the hack taking
Didn't
place.
they? Didn't they have? Was it Jeremy Hammond in prison for the Stratfor hacks for a long
To
time?
this day, he's still in prison. He's almost done. His time is winding down, but he got 10 years for that.
Haven't you got like a law for entrapment over there in the US?
So entrapment is weird. I've been looking into it because I didn't, because that was my first thought too, is clear entrapment.
Yeah.
There's two prongs to proving entrapment. The first one
Oh,
is you
God.
have to prove that the government was coerced someone to commit a criminal act. Okay, we've got that. We've got that in spades, Gordon.
And
The
then they
second
inserted another one to give them wiggle room.
Absolutely. The second part is you have to prove that the person was not, wouldn't have otherwise committed criminal behavior and didn't have any criminal activity in their past. And in Hammond's case and in Julian Assange's case, there are computer intrusion charges going back to when they were teenagers.
Yeah, I mean, it's if I remember right, Julian got, was it in Australia? He got caught doing something in Australia, and he learnt his lesson, and that's why he figured out a way of creating WikiLeaks, and it's
Yeah. Yeah, no, he had an information disclosure outlet uh, when he was a teenager.
so
And
there's a new indictment, and this new indictment, is this guy the main witness? Is he the?
there are two. This is how
You're
des-
laughing, so I'm
this is
assuming
how
they both don't add
desperate
up to one.
the Department of Justice is. So star witness number one is this guy Sabu, who we know was an FBI asset. Was an FBI asset before any criminal activity took place. All right, already fully working with the FBI. The second guy is their go-between between the LulzSec hackers and WikiLeaks, and this guy is named Sigurd Thordarson.
Oh, he's the.
By Siggy.
Yeah.
Okay, so his online handle was teenagers. So this guy, their other star witness, has been certified as a sociopath by Icelandic health ministers and by the Icelandic, their health department. Um, he's a convicted pedophile. He's did 8 years.
Solid witness, man.
Yeah. It was a complete and total con artist and thief who Julian was nervous about from the moment he started involving himself with WikiLeaks. This guy passed himself off as Julian Assange on a number of times, Gordon. So when Julian Assange is listed in this indictment, there's no way to prove that it was actually Julian Assange. It could have been this guy pretending to be him. And those are the U.S. government's two-star witnesses: convicted pedophile, registered sociopath, con man, and paid FBI informant, and another paid FBI informant. That's why I'm
This
laughing.
can't end up. This can't end up. Like you say, it's not even extradition, is it?
No, it's a kidnapping in broad daylight. It is.
They keep saying it's extradition to the United States, but
it's an extraordinary rendition.
Extraordinary rendition.
Without the black
because
bag.
he's not American.
No, he's an Australian citizen, and he's basically getting the black bag put over his head slowly in the courtroom, and then they're going to throw him in a black hole in a supermax prison for 175 years for doing journalism.
And obviously, there's a media blackout over here, and the reason there's a media blackout over here on this, and the reason there are, I mean, the way they report on it is quite frankly, there were times when I've laughed out loud. I mean, it's so preposterous the way they frame things in order to basically dumb down the population and keep them placid and docile. Because if an average man, and I think of myself as a pretty much average man in this country, knew the truth about Julian Assange, they would go down there and start shouting and screaming and chaining themselves into the railings, and I don't know, maybe even start a YouTube channel and start screaming. I don't know, but you see my point. I mean, the fact of the matter is he's being tortured for telling the truth, and I was always brought up to tell the truth. My mom was she's instilled that in me, and she instilled the fact that the truth really does matter, and you can get behind thieves, but you can't get behind liars. This is what she always told me. So I really do value it, and I've said this before many times as well. I'm not a Julian Assange supporter. I've been referred to as that many times. I'm not. I've never met the man. Never. And in my opinion, my experience, rather, not my opinion, in my experience, highly intelligent people tend to be absolute cocks. Look at Elon Musk, So I'm not expecting Julian Assange to be a good person. I'm not expecting anything from the guy at all. But what he stands for is journalism. What he stands for is the fourth estate. And what he stands for is a working democracy. And that's it. And to me, if he is extradited, you are proving 100% once and for all that we don't have a democracy in the UK or in the US. What we actually have is a fascist government that's doing fascism on its own people, and you're proving it. And I for one, I'm tired of. I get so angry about it, and I've been so angry about it because it's like shouting into the ether, you know? It's like screaming into the void. You don't get anything at all from them. And it can really be, it can be draining. So I really appreciate what you and the people at Action for Assange have done in keeping the the flame, I know, sort of alight, and with so many live streams and all your great work over the last few months, because you know during the crisis it really needed to have those voices just shouting and saying this is really important. We cannot take our eye off the ball with this. So I wanted to thank you and Taylor and the other guys there for all the efforts that you've put in.
Well, thank you, Ben.